so grateful to him for that, the privilege of being able to take care of him in those last moments. And I'm thankful for all of you for being there and witness to I know it's like a different way to do things and people aren't used to it, but it's how we did it for thousands of years. And coming back to that place of just simple. Matthew always wanted things to be simple, although they were often kind of complicated capers. But he did want things to be simple, and he wanted them to be pure and true and beautiful, just like he was. Thank you all for being here, and I will never, ever, ever forget him, and he will always be in my heart.
I'm Annabelle from Buffalo. Don't know what I'm going to say, but I thought a lot about it, like how deeply knowing Matthew has impacted my life. And I've only known him for about a year. And I'm like, am I putting him on a pedestal? You know, but I look at all these interactions I observed between friends and people, and I see how he treats other people and regards other people with respect all the time. And then I got to read his essay in that publication of Confessions, More Confessions, for the prison faith inspirational. Yeah, there's copies of it floating around here. And when I got to read like this deep self-reflection that he did, and how he wasn't always so kind, you know, like he in some ways he was, because he had this beautiful family, but in other ways, you know, he was a teenager and a 20-something-year-old guy who was figuring stuff out and learning, I don't feel good when I do certain things, when I treat people or my own self certain ways, you know, so we really processed all that stuff. That's part of what I wanted to share. Like, I got to witness his grieving. He didn't bypass it. He didn't, spiritually bypass the grief and the rage that he had to process as he had to accept dying so young and leaving his physical body behind. And I got to be with him as he cried and danced and painted and wrote, and it was cool to see some old school things, coming back into like he loved writing people letters. I'm like, it's so nice to see, it reminds me of when I was a kid. So he really did this deep work to lighten his heart on a regular basis, and so I truly feel like, so I'm so full of cake right now too, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm so full of cake now. I'm also full of this feeling of, I just want to talk about infinite vibrations of love. I just want to say that to everybody. And all my text messages and all my interactions, I'm like, just want to tell everybody how much I love them. And I'm like, thank you, Coyothew. Thank you for that inspiration. Like, that's what I want to carry forward, and I just feel like really, that's okay. I can be a copycat. I can be inspired. I can say, oh my gosh, I want to hear Uma sing that. I don't know the melody, but it's so, I feel just really like he's living on in a Christ-like way by how we treat each other, how much we regard each other. Another little story is, which I'm sure many people know, is whenever we go to the hospital, we go to Roswell or somewhere, in the van, at the door when we would check in, he knew everybody's name. He'd go, oh, hey, hey Greg, how you doing? It's, good to see you today. And he remembered everybody. And I was like, wow. And he genuinely was interested in these fellow beings. And it a way that wasn't in a rush or anything, and it was really inspiring. So I will sing my heart, and it's okay if I don't know what's next. I'm gonna love everybody, gonna love this body, and gonna love everybody, and gonna love the spirit of light. What's so familiar about you? It's the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit. You're so familiar, as if I knew you infinitely, so many times before. This love is eternal, gonna soothe you in our hearts. Let yourself shine, dear, let yourself shine, and it's gonna be alright. Thank you.
My good friend Matthew, or also known as Coyothew, combined his two names, Matthew and Coyote, some people call him. So towards the end, he evolved into Coyothew, so that's how I knew him. Yeah, he's a really special person to me, and I was really grateful in the past year, especially that he spent in Buffalo. We just got to spend a lot of time together, and yeah, he was just always bringing good energy no matter what he was going through. He just had like such a big heart, and always was playing jokes, and always had his clown nose on, and just just always bringing that uplifting energy. And the first time I met him, actually, we were at a psychedelic society meeting in Western New York, and he was wearing a banana shirt, and when it came to his time to talk, he was talking about bananas, and he would go around the city and collecting all these bananas that people were throwing out and giving them to, homeless people, and trying to feed people. And he was just like, I was just like, who is this guy? He's just wearing this banana shirt, talking about bananas, and then just like, and yeah, from that moment, I just wanted to connect with him deeper. And then I didn't really see him for too many years after that. And then he came back to Buffalo, and I had this New Year's Eve party, and he was there, and he was wearing this gray suit with a purple vest, and he had a purple top hat, and he just had he was one of the most fashionable guys I knew, and he met my friend Rook, Jimmy, there for the first time, and and I was playing some music, and I was DJing, and they both loved to dance. They were both really into dancing, and they just had this impromptu improv dance where they just it was just one of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed. I'm just playing the song, and they just had this beautiful dance together, and it was just a really cherished memory. And and in that time they really became really close. And Matthew took him to his first, Jimmy to his first sweat lodge, and yeah, they just became inseparable friends. And then unfortunately, last summer Jimmy ended up passing away. He had a brain aneurysm. And so him and Matthew became so close in such a short time, but then unfortunately Jimmy had moved on. But it makes me really happy to think about the two of them just dancing, just up in heaven, just up in the cosmos, whatever you believe in. These two beautiful, inseparable souls that mean a lot to me, just being together and dancing through the universe. And so that brings a smile to my face. But yeah, I'm just really grateful to have come down here, and everyone I met is just really kind and wonderful. And people from Buffalo, we had to come show some love to someone who had just such a large impact on this world and all the communities that he touched. So yeah, thank you to everyone who knew him and were a part of his life. And thank you. Appreciate you.
Judy. I was a friend of Matthew's. I met him going on 3 years ago. His sister Katie and I have been friends for 10 years. And he was living in the apartment beside of me. And it was kind of strange that we hit it off the way we did, because at the time I was 67 and Matthew was about 35. But we had a lot in common and we had a lot of talks. But Matthew was very unique. And one day he said to me, as you know, his favorite color is purple. And he said, Judy, you want to see my purple suit? I'm like, sure. Well, he comes in my kitchen door with a woman's purple suit on. And I had just met him, and I'm like, okay. And I just looked at him and said, what color shirt are you going to wear with that? And we kept in touch while he was in New York. And every time I talked to him or asked him about anything, it was always, Judy, don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Somehow he put that app on my phone, on my profile, But that was Matthew, And he traveled to his own drummer, and I'm so glad that he did. Because, like a lot of other people have said here, he lived his life, and he lived it the way he wanted to. He didn't let other people tell him how to live it. And I'm glad that he did that, because 38 years old and he's gone. But he left a lasting impression on me. I'm 70 now. He'll be 38, I believe, in July. 39. And I have never met anybody like Matthew before. He was kind, and I'm just thankful that we became friends.
Everybody, I'm just going to take a moment to take you all in. It helps me when I'm talking in front of a whole bunch of people, especially people I don't know, to just look at you. Because you're just people just like me. So you're a beautiful group. Yeah. Matthew and I were dear friends. We had a special name for our friendship. We called it Honey Home, because it felt like home and it felt like honey to be together. And I'm so grateful for all the ways that he touched me. And I just pray that I can be true to the memories. I introduced Coyothew to a couple of my friends. Last year on his birthday, I had a friend visiting from Massachusetts, and another dear friend who I speak to often called a couple of times when Matthew and I were in the hospital. And these women who I've known for many years were deeply touched by Coyothew with just the tiniest bit of opportunity to know him. And one of my dear friends, Susan, wrote this poem about him, and I want to share it with you. It's called Inexplicable. Life, sometimes short, sometimes inexplicably long. With you, today feels inexplicably short. Precious, blink of an eye, without another year passing by. Tall grass by water's edge, day inexplicably turning to night. Beginnings and endings, and your light so bright, it can no longer be contained within flesh, without burning. You, Coyothew, brightness of blue eyes, with golden yellow fire inside. That is what I perceive from your hospital bed, an utterly luminous light shining so brightly, a heart on fire, blazing with unimaginable beauty. Bursting into starlight you are as you depart from weighted flesh to become the horizon. Inexplicable beauty. There can be no permanent goodbye as you expand into space and arrive on the threshold of a new beginning, brighter than the eye can perceive, yet known, eternal. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Hai. I was Matthew's friend. I'm proud of myself for discovering a shorter route to walk to the microphone. Thank you. I met Matthew through Keith, Avi, and Olivia's love for him in the fall of 2019. When I moved to Buffalo. It wasn't until December 2020 that I first met this bald, small monk outside of Keith's contemplative prayer who didn't, wasn't quite the image of him that I had from their descriptions. But when I next saw him in December 2021, just so full of vigor, fiery red hair, beard, invited me to ecstatic dance, which Avi had invited me to for years, but I finally said yes, and I was hooked. I immediately fell in love with that community. There aren't that many times in our days or our lives when we're with someone who really pays attention to us and really gets us. We can go to doctors, we can go to other professionals who get paid a lot of money to listen to us, to pay attention, and yet you're sitting there in the room with them and you feel alone, and you feel like you're not listening. And with Matthew, it just felt like your dreams was what he cared about, what he was paying attention to, what he would speak to. And you just felt so alive with him, but it wasn't just him, right? These communities that he would build up around himself, the people would then interact with each other in that same way. In every sharing circle I was ever in with him, he would be present. The microphone or whatever would come to him, and he would be in that moment, speaking what was alive for him, modeling for each of us how we can, if we are ourselves as best we can, trying to do that at least some of the time. And Matthew was just doing that all of the time as a model for us. Matthew wrote a chapter in this book, More to This Confession, Relational Prison Theology, part of Jesus the Liberator Seminary, which helps individuals that are in prisons, physical or otherwise, find their own personal liberation through writing. And the editor of the book gave me this to read, which is going to be put on a display outside a local bookstore in Buffalo with Matthew's photo as a tribute, with many copies of this book they're selling. Matthew was beloved within many communities, a participant in many communities, a seeker of ways to connect modes of spiritual realities outside of the mainstream empire. With a flourish and flamboyance, he traveled and explored and experimented in truth. He was a lover of life. And so the bookstore that is selling this is run by someone who founded a local Buffalo nonprofit that grew to have 100 employees and a national scope in going to conferences and influencing other housing justice nonprofits. And then after many years of building up that huge organization, he left and started a bookstore. And he's just been following Matthew's journey. Matthew's apartment on Oak Street is a block away from the bookstore, so Matthew would walk in, Matthew would roll in for these delicious waffles as well as books at Fitz Books and Waffles. And just the owner of the bookstore just so broken heart over the loss of Matthew. So young, but also he just said he'd never met someone who had that effect, that powerful effect on so many people who loved him. As we all in this room know what it's like to love Matthew and to be loved by Matthew. So, thank you.
I'm not sure how to speak about this person. But no one's loved me like Matthew loved me. Hi, I don't know some of you. I'm Olivia. Matthew and I were in a partnership for about 4 years. For some reason, I want to tell you all that he carried a teeny tiny flashlight in his pocket, like at all times. And just in the pocket that nobody uses, like you have your regular pockets, and then you have that like teeny pocket that's in your regular pocket. Merle uses it, I'm sure he does. And Matthew was just, he had a little flashlight in there. He taught me to love hankies, to use a hanky for my tears and my nose. And my napkin, and we were this funny, crunchy couple who brought our own silverware everywhere we went. There were a lot of themes of death and dying through Matthew and I's partnership. Merle and Jane visited us in Buffalo, and we all went to something called a death cafe, where we sat around, we ate cake, and we talked about death. And we had really honest conversations with Merle and Jane about death. And then Matthew and I went to Stephen Jenkinson's Grief and Mystery Tour, and it was such a foreshadow. Like, it really was, the seed was planted early on. And I was so lovingly embraced by the whole Holsinger family. They took me as one of their own immediately. Matthew and I had just been traveling cross country. I hit a mule deer with my Honda Civic, so then him and I hitchhiked from southern Colorado to northern Colorado, where we then caught a ride with someone's grandpa who I knew from my job previously in Tahoe, and they drove us across, and we found another ride, and it's just the way my dad always used to talk about it. Like, I tend to have pretty, like, good luck, like things can just kind of like, not right now, but things can like piece together well, and Matthew also had that bridging capacity. He knew someone who knew someone over there who was looking for a thing, and so much of it was just about how he got to know whoever was sitting with him, and he'd get underneath the like, yeah, I'm fine, and he'd learn what they need. He'd learn what they have to offer. He'd learn their dreams and their visions, and he'd remember it. And when he's talking to someone in Virginia after one of his hitchhiking journeys, he'd remember, hey, I know someone who's actually planting a permaculture garden, and I'll connect you via email. And it was just... So my dad always used to talk about, like, oh, you two together, of course you figured out how to get from southern Colorado back to Maryland with all of your stuff, and it was just, Yeah, he was my adventure pal. We went on a lot of adventures. And we arrived at the Holsteiners' house after this grand, long, exhausting adventure, and they took me. They took me as one of theirs. They still do. After all this, they still do. Oh. I'm rambling. I have so much to say. I've, just never loved someone like I loved him, and to lose someone with such intimate memories of, I don't know how to talk about it, but thank you for listening to what I've spoken about thus far, and like you said, Avi, we're gonna keep talking about it. We're gonna keep talking about the impact, all the impacts, the hard impacts, the confusing impacts, the brilliant impacts. It's something we'll probably need to process this lifetime and on. So thanks for being in this with us, and I love you all.
Sorry, I always save myself for last because I'm terrible at public speaking, so forgive me. But, Matthew has been my friend for half my life, probably. I've known him for 20 years. It's been a wild ride. I feel like I've got a front, whatever you call it. Sometimes I'm also very bad at English because I speak Spanish a lot now, but a front row seat to all the different people that he is and all the different people he's been and the person that he is, and he really just has the best way of creating a home wherever he ends up. From being on tour with the Disco Biscuits and going to music festivals, he was always the first one to set up the disco wall and put up the speaker and make a little living room for us all to gather and to take a break from dancing sometimes, or to start a dance party at 4 in the morning. And really to, just convene us together, and that was always a beautiful thing. He's also had so many more friends than I have. No matter what country we're in, he came and visited my husband and I in Colombia, and he's there for like a month, and he shows back up at our house, and he tells us stories of all the friends he's made and communities that he's settled into, the permaculture farm and teaching English, and I'm just like, you've only been here a month. How have you made so many friends, and how have you created such a community around you? I know like 3 people in this whole country. One of them's my husband. But it's just, he's always had that ability, and it's wherever he's been in whatever phase of Matthew or Coyote, or the beautiful balance he found at the end, being Coyothew, he's able to do it. And I remember after traveling in South America when he was looking for a home, I said, well, you could just come to Buffalo. We can kind of do anything we want here. And he was like, oh, that sounds good. And every time I would get uptight and doubt myself and be very grounded like I tend to be, and he's always not very grounded. I mean, he's grounded in a way, but he's also so ethereal and so full of life and in the air. He would say, you said you could do anything here. And I would have to remind myself that maybe I can. He's always had that ability to do that for me and for all of us. And I don't know how he made so many friends. It's so impressive. And seeing the community he's built in Buffalo has been so amazing. And I'm so grateful to know you guys all, and to have you be my extended friends through him too. And it's been really beautiful, and I find so much peace with, who he is and who he was at the end. And I think he found so much peace within himself, and he's such an extreme person, he's bounced from big thing to big thing, and, he settled just into a beautiful place of balance. And I think that's a good lesson, that you can be everything, and you could be with everything, and you can make friends with everybody, really, because what's stopping you? Our last Disco Biscuit show was in Buffalo in January. We couldn't believe it. We were like, well, we're going. It was so beautiful. And our friend Polly wrote to them, and they played Home Again for him. And he stood up out of his wheelchair, and he just danced the whole time, and he was so elated and so happy to be back, and it just felt like such a full circle moment, because I've seen him live such a big, bold, beautiful life, and here we are back at a Disco Biscuit show, listening to Home Again, which only has like four words, or 4 lines of lyrics in the whole song. But it says, never had a home like this, and the prophet said, be careful what you wish. Always, never had to think twice, always knew my home was in paradise. And the day that he passed, they had another show in Denver, and they played that. And I'd like to think that they played it for him. So thank you for experiencing that with me.
My name is Suze, and I'll just say, Anna, thank you for toying with the idea of me coming here, because if it wasn't for you even exploring the idea that I'd be here with an infant. Impossible things happened around Matthew since I knew him, and one of which I'm glad, Olivia, for your share, because Matthew, I entered into a really beautiful, safe relationship and friendship with Matthew because he was so committed to you, Liv, and I trusted in how much he loved you, and so it felt so safe to be this other female friend. And many of my closest friends are actually because I met them through Matthew, and I'm looking at many of your faces here, actually. And I just wanted to say the impossible things. One day, Matthew and I are talking, and he mentions this band, Mamuse, playing in Ithaca. And I was like, Mamuse, never heard of them. He said, you haven't? Next day, my mom is letting us borrow her car, and a bunch of us are driving out to Ithaca to see this band I'd never seen before, and we ended up camping on somebody's roof, like in their earthen house. And then we later subsequently ran in the rain down to a stream, and then were naked laying on the bank, and the little family, wonderful friends were putting hot rocks on us and giving us like a sauna experience in another country. It's like bizarre things happened that I couldn't really share with many people without them being like, what? And so I just really appreciate his like unabashedness and being like boldly his own, and to his family, who I know he loved so much and loved him deeply. It's hard to love someone like that sometimes. And sometimes Matthew was hard to love because it was a lot. It was a big love. And sometimes, is there anybody else that needed a little space from it? But the reconnecting was always... Yeah. But it was the time away from Matthew, which was also the most powerful, because then when there was a reconnecting moment, and it was through dance, he brought me to dance and showed me that it was okay to show up in your grief, in your anger, in your pain. You guys all did. I could show up as who I was, and that I will always value. That was his example that he set. And that was through the dance that I learned that. And then when we needed our separation, after a beautiful trip here where I got to meet his family, and unfortunately, sometimes he was like a mirror, and the parts of myself that I didn't like reared up in him. So it was always important learnings, but we needed to take some space, and then just one day, he's at Soul Rise, our dance place, and we always said that we would talk about what happened, who was right, who was wrong, you know, how we weren't respected or whatever, and instead we just met through the dance floor again, and looked at each other and just said, I love you, and I love you, and then we just like danced like crazy people, and we never had to talk about what went wrong or what we needed to fix. It just was instantly fixed in a moment of non-verbal connection, and that was what he brought into my life, and I was there the day he bought the purple suit. And I just was so happy that someone else, you know, got to express how stunning he was as a human and sometimes you were stunned, you know, and sometimes he was just
That's a
stunning.
good word.
Yeah, so thank you for letting me share a bit, and thank you for also his family, you know, for putting up with him and loving him deeply and missing him and continuing to share about him. And I was hoping that he would be like Uncle Matthew to this little guy because he's really good to some nibblings, but you know, we will just have to keep him alive. So thank you guys for listening.
We're all still on a journey this side of where Matthew is now. Where he is at home in the perfect sense. That he discovered home, obviously, in this life in so many different ways. But all of them pointing to our true home that Jesus has prepared the way for us. And there's words familiar to some of us, and maybe some of us have just heard, a little bit of them in it. When he was comforting his disciples, as he was preparing them for him, his home going to be with the Father. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust in me. In my Father's house, in my Father's home, are many rooms. In other words, room enough for us all. If it were not so, I would have told you, I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am.
Hello again. I wanted to share a very quick quote and then a short prayer in Aramaic and a short prayer in Hebrew that's traditionally said after funerals. This is a quote by Jamie Anderson, an author. She said, "Grief is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, and the lump in your throat, and in the hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go." And we have a lot of love for Matthew. Traditionally, when a family member dies in Judaism, you say this prayer every single day for an entire year after their passing. And this is just a short piece of it. But the words are in Jesus' language that he spoke in Aramaic. And the words are, Le'ela u'le'ela, min kol bechata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram ve'alma ve'imru, amen. Literally translates to beyond any words, any songs, any prayers that are whispered in this world and the next world and the next world. Go beyond. And we say amen. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומם, ומצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושות וטהורות, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהרים את נשמת מת'יו בן מרל, הולסינגר, שהלכה לעולמה בעבור שנדבו צדקה בעד הזכרת נשמתה. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. לכן בעול הרחמים יסתירי בסתר כנפי לעולמים, וייצר בצור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן. Merciful God, who dwells above, provide a complete and sure rest on the wings of divine presence. amongst the holy and pure who shine as brightly as the sky, to the soul of Matthew, the son of Merle Holsinger, who has gone on to his eternity. For the sake of the charity which they gave to commemorate his soul, let him be at rest in the Garden of Eden. Hence, the merciful one will shade his forever with his wings, and will bind him in the bundle of life. The Lord is his heritage, and he shall rest peacefully on his bed. So let us say, Amen.
Everyone's meant to be here.